welcome to today's webinar. As you'll note, this meeting is being recorded and summarized. So welcome to today's Clean Mobility Program informational webinar, or as we sometimes call it, Program Opportunity Notice 5739 Round 2. My name is Rachel Fitzman. I am a Senior Project Manager at NYSERDA and one of the project managers on this program. And I'll pass it over to Richard.
Yeah, hi everyone. Richard Mai, also a Senior Project Manager with the Clean Transportation team here at NYSERDA. Also will be a project manager for many of these projects. I'll pass it over to Alexia.
Thanks, Richard. My name is Alexia Heinrich. I'm one of the project managers here on the Clean Transportation team, and will also be involved with the demonstration projects. And I'll pass it off to Juno.
Hi, everyone. I am Juno from NYSERDA, and I'll be supporting the Clean Mobility Program. Next, I'll pass it over to Wendy at one of our support contractors, which is Energetics.
It's a pleasure to see you all. I'm Wendy Lucht, and I'm with Energetics, and I am excited to be a support contractor with NYSERDA CMP.
And hi everyone. I'm Catherine Banner, also with Energetics. So you'll be hearing from both Wendy and myself from time to time on this project, and excited to see what you all put together.
Thanks. All right, and with that, we'll move to the next slide, please. So today we'll be covering an overview of the Clean Mobility Program, the mission requirements, timeline for proposals, and when you can expect to hear back and get under contract if awarded, some other program resources we've developed, and then we'll have opportunity for Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. So just wanted to go over some webinar housekeeping. Attendees will be muted upon entry, and the webinar is being recorded. Questions and comments can be submitted in writing through the Slido Q&A feature. So you can click the button on the left-hand side, I believe it is, and type in your questions. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity to address those. So to submit the question, you click the three dots on the lower right-hand corner, and then select that Slido option. And we'll be monitoring them throughout. Please feel free to ask your questions throughout the webinar, but we will be addressing them at the end. Next slide. So now we'll go over just kind of the basics of the Clean Mobility Program. Next slide, please. So the goal of the Clean Mobility Program is really to improve first and last mile access and connections to public transportation. We're looking for innovative shared public transportation options at a community scale, so really focusing on communities, particularly those that are underserved and disadvantaged. So we aren't requiring that they meet the New York State disadvantaged community criteria, but we are looking for underserved populations really as kind of the core of the project. The project should provide zero emission options to those who can't and do not want to own personal vehicles and or don't want to own personal vehicles, but live in areas with limited public transportation. And help equip communities with the tools to plan for mobility solutions that are best suited to their needs. So we're looking for communities really driving the projects themselves, and really kind of empowered to understand what kinds of solutions are needed for their specific community, and choose who is right for them to implement that in partnership with them. So really what we're looking toward is supporting a shift towards the clean and zero emission transportation and shared mobility options that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector in the state. Next slide. So some examples of what we're talking about here are things like on-demand zero-emission vehicle ride-hailing or zero-emission microtransit. So, on-demand or shuttles, micromobility, so personal or shared e-bikes or regular bikes or e-scooters, zero-emission shared mobility like carpooling or car sharing with EVs. And lastly, we're also considering mobility hubs. So, for example, micromobility charging stations. The key here really is that, all of these services need to be zero emission. And the other piece too is that the technologies have to be commercially viable. So, what that means is really like this has been done before. And perhaps in your proposal, you show a case study of where, that type of technology has worked and been successful. So we're not looking to demonstrate, brand new technologies. We're looking for, more, ones that have been done before, but maybe not in that particular community, or expanding a service in a community to an underserved area. Next slide. So we have 4 types of eligible entities who can apply as the lead. So 1 is local governments, 2 is transit operators, 3 is community-based organizations or nonprofits, and last is employers or groups of employers. And here we're defining employers as those with a total of at least 1,000 employees in the community that proposes the project. And the idea being that the employer would provide the mobility solution for their employees in New York State. So while solutions providers can be part of a team, the prime has to be one of these eligible entities. Next slide. So to go over the program structure, we had a planning track last year that closed last year, where we allowed folks to apply who perhaps did not have a mobility plan, didn't know what solution their community needed necessarily, but knew that there was a transportation challenge. And we awarded 6-month planning grants with awards up to $100,000 for folks to conduct needs assessment and really kind of plan for what types of solutions they would have in their community if awarded demonstration funding. We also had a demonstration track in round 1 as well for those applicants who had completed their plans and were looking for a demonstration fund to implement those. So this round 2 only includes funding for the demonstration track. So we expect that all of our applicants have completed mobility planning. Any mobility planning that has not been completed would need to be done at the applicant's expense before starting the demonstration project. We're really looking for full mobility plans and kind of understanding the needs and what this service would look like at the time of getting started with the project. So we're looking to demonstrate innovative public and shared transportation options at a community scale, again, zero emission. And the project duration would be up to 3 years with awards of up to $3 million per project. And with that, I will pass it over to Richard.
Thanks, Rachel. Next slide, please. All right, so a lot of this will be covered in the program opportunity notice documents you'll find online, but what I'll go into now is just a little bit of the key highlights from that, and we'll go over that in detail. So as you can see here, there's some required documentation before you can apply to the program. You are required to submit a completed mobility plan, as Rachel mentioned, to show that you've done some of the planning work necessary for a demonstration project. Attachment A, which we share on the website, is the planning statement of work that a lot of the previous teams that may have done work with NYSERDA in round one did. You can reference that to get an idea of the types of work that we're looking for. That being said, you don't need to have done work with NYSERDA to apply for this. We understand that a lot of communities have done plenty of planning work, like technical feasibility and things like that. We'll get into, but that's an idea of what's been done already. And finally, two other things is anything that's related to micromobility, especially e-bikes and e-scooters, they do need to meet industry certifications, including being UL certified. And finally, there's only one proposal per applicant. So we just want to put that out there. Next slide, please. So just going into a little bit of the completed mobility plan requirements, you'll see these are tasks that we hope you have completed prior to applying. These include community engagement, site identification, and site identification can be at the neighborhood or corridor level. You don't need to have a specific intersection or corner even selected. If you do, that's great, but we understand that at this point, it doesn't need to be like a detailed site assessment. Identification of project partners, technical feasibility, and attachment A goes into a little more detail into some of those things. If you do have any gaps in planning, we don't want to discourage you from applying. This is just an idea of what we're looking for. If you do apply and you're missing like one or two items, that's okay, but we'll just note that it will have to be done at your own expense. So if you haven't done any community engagement, it'd be best if you can demonstrate that before we enter into contract. And finally, with a lot of the work we're doing, we understand that long-term financial sustainability is important. That is something else we're looking for in these plans, especially if you're awarded demonstration grant funding. It'd be great to see that you have a strategy for sustaining that operation long-term beyond NYSERDA funding. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the funding requirements. Again, this is not just for like sustaining ongoing operations. We're trying to focus on launching or expanding new transportation services, especially for zero. It must be a zero emission mode, whether it's active or electric. Those are both eligible. We do cover the equipment itself, whether it's the zero emission vehicles or devices and or the charging infrastructure. Other costs include, maybe indirect costs include the complete streets infrastructure, if you will, bike and bus lanes, street safety improvements. However, that is capped at 20% of the NYSERDA funding amount. We are, definitely we're NYSERDA, we're not really your local transportation authority, so that's not really our jurisdiction. It has to be directly applicable to your proposal. So for example, if you're requesting 1 million in NYSERDA funds, up to 200,000 can be for those other infrastructure costs. Also, demonstration projects do have a cost share requirement. That's also 20%, but that's 20% of the total project cost must be non-NYSERDA cost share. So another example, if you have a total project of 4 million, at least $800,000 must be cost share. So it'd be like 3 million NYSERDA, at least 800K, for example. And finally, we just want to point out there is dedicated funding for projects in priority areas. This is identified as upstate New York and the Bronx, and we're going to go into a little more detail on the next slide, please. All right, so while all of New York State communities are eligible to apply for the Clean Mobility Program, there are some set-asides, allocations set for priority areas. We define this as upstate New York. So that is $5 million in program funding set aside for specifically electric micromobility solutions serving low to moderate income individuals and disadvantaged communities, specifically in the upstate investor-owned utilities. This is Central Hudson, National Grid, NYSEG, New York State Electric and Gas, and Rochester Electric and Gas. This does not include the quote-unquote downstate, which is Con Ed and Long Island. Again, this is just a set-aside. That doesn't mean that if you're a downstate, you can't apply to this program. The second bucket is Bronx. This one is just $3 million set aside exclusively for any project type located in the Bronx. And the last thing we'll note here is we will evaluate all proposals based on the evaluation criteria, but when we're making awards, we will just make note, of these set asides as we make those awards. Next slide, please. And another thing we wanted to expand upon is what we define as mobility solutions providers. So in round one, we sort of focused mainly on operators as a definition. In this round, we expanded that to include manufacture, supply, develop, install, operate, and or maintain. These includes the EVs and micromobility devices, the charging equipment as well for those associated devices, and also just if you're a program that supports those devices as well. And my colleague Alexia will get into this a little bit more later on, but there will be an informational resource as well. And one final note on this is for those that worked with NYSERDA in round one, mobility solutions providers that did the planning work can't also be the operator itself in round two, if you're demonstrating that plan. And finally, next slide, please. So just a quick recap. As part of round two, we completed the planning track. So unfortunately, there's no more planning funds. Hopefully everyone's in pretty good shape to apply for a demonstration. We expanded the definition of a mobility provider and clarified some of these project areas, priority project areas. We have about close to 22 million remaining for this round. And finally, the evaluation criteria, we just made a few tweaks to demonstrate, in your proposal, you will need to demonstrate environmental impact for the community, demonstrate some challenges and barriers of your approach, and we'll also take into account reasonableness of equipment costs based on market conditions. And with that, I'll pass it over to Alexia. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Richard. Next slide, please. So I'll go into some of the details of the submission requirements for those of you who are interested in learning more about applying for this solicitation. So next slide, please. So the PON 5739 funding opportunity page, which I've included a picture of right here to the right-hand side of your screen, is where you'll be applying and finding the related documents associated with this solicitation. So yeah, you may hear us refer to this funding opportunity page as the solicitation page, just heads up that that's synonymous. But anyways, you can navigate to this funding opportunity page from our main program website under the program update section. You can also just try doing a simple Google search for NYSERDA Clean Mobility or NYSERDA PON 5739. It should pop up. And eventually when we distribute the slides to you all, you'll be able to access the links here at the bottom of the page. So yeah, when you eventually reach the funding opportunity page, you'll see a section called Associated Documents. So it's in this section, you'll find the PON summary document that Richard mentioned, which includes all those nitty-gritty details about the submission requirements. And then you'll also have attachment A, which we've mentioned now. So that document is for reference only and sort of outlines the planning work that we expect to be completed by teams who intend to implement. And you'll also find some additional information documents. So there'll also be templates. You'll just be required to fill those out and submit it as part of your application. And in a moment, I'll go through the exact ones that you'll need to upload. But before I do that, just wanted to quickly mention where to actually go to complete your application. So you can start your application through the NYSERDA portal just by clicking Apply Online, which is under this application submission section on the page. And applications are due by 3:00 p.m. Eastern on September 25th, 2025. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as promised, just going to get into the details of which documents you need to complete in order to submit your application. So specifically from the documents that were listed on that funding opportunity page we just showed you, you'll need to fill out and upload attachments B through D and upload them to the NYSERDA portal. So I have a screen grab here to the right, which shows what that upload screen is going to look like. All the other attachments on the funding opportunity page are for reference only. Oh, and as we mentioned, you'll be required to upload a clean mobility plan. So this is the document that demonstrates that you've completed all the necessary planning work to be eligible for project implementation. We don't have a template for this, so this is not something you're going to see on the funding opportunity page. This is something that should have been compiled already on your end, either as a round 1 awardee or independently. I would just strongly recommend that everyone look at the documents on the funding opportunity page as soon as possible, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. Next slide, please. Great, thank you. So if this is the first time that you're applying for NYSERDA funding, or just run into any sort of issues navigating the NYSERDA portal, we would strongly suggest that you refer to the NYSERDA solicitation user guide. So we have a picture here, and again, it'll be linked on the slides when those are sent out to you all. But if at any point after reviewing the guide, you're still unable to troubleshoot issues, we recommend that you reach out to Jim Kalman, whose email is listed here on the page. And yeah, something that we recommend that all applicants do is start their application early. So I showed you that slide before where you upload your documents. But once you get into the portal, you'll see that there's a few more pages of information that you have to fill out before you get to that document upload page. So just really would encourage you to get in that portal early. 3 p.m. deadline strict, so we won't be accepting any late applications. Would really hate for folks to start their application a few minutes before thinking all they have to do is upload documents and not have time to submit. So please check that out sooner rather than later. With that, next slide, please. So yeah, let's move along to the project timeline. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So as you all know, the program launched last Thursday and folks have 8 weeks total to submit their applications. So as mentioned, that deadline is September 25th, 2025 at 3 p.m. And in the meantime, to support eligible entities in the application process, we're going to be offering another virtual event next week, which we'll chat more about in a minute. But moving along in this timeline, we're hoping to notify teams of whether their proposal was successful by the end of the year. So likely December 2025. And hopefully by the spring, all agreements with successful applicants will be finalized and we'll be able to publicly announce awards. Yeah, so now let's move along and discuss some of the resources and points of contact. Next slide, please. Next slide. So to help applicants identify potential partners or vendors for proposal, our NYSERDA support contractor team help us pull together a list of mobility solution providers that do work in New York State. So we refer to this resource as the Mobility Solutions Provider Directory. And the link to that directory is at the bottom of the slide here. I think we should also be dropping a link in the chat. But just a heads up that this directory is strictly intended as an informational resource and is not intended to be any sort of like recommendation or endorsement of the companies listed. Yeah, again, these are just providers of the EVs and micromobility devices and associated charging infrastructure and other supporting services that are eligible under the program. And to supplement this and like further support the applicants, we're going to be hosting a virtual showcase or webinar where the organizations that are featured in the directory can give a brief overview of their services. So this event's taking place next week on Thursday, August 14th. We've broken it up into 2 sessions. So the first session is in the morning. We'll be primarily focusing on solutions for 2-wheeled vehicles, so think bikes, scooters, that sort of thing, and any supporting services. And the afternoon session, which is from 1 to 3, is primarily focused on 4-wheeled vehicles. So this event is, again, free to attend as with all of our programming, but we just ask that you pre-register for the session. So that link is available on the virtual showcase of mobility solution providers link that's at the bottom of this page. And again, should be eventually dropping that in the chat. Next slide, please. So yeah, this about concludes the content for today. If you have any questions about the solicitation, please feel free to shoot us an email at the Clean Mobility Program email that's listed multiple times on the left side of the screen. There's also our phone numbers if you prefer to give us a ring. Again, if you have any issues with the portal itself in applying, please reach Jim. His contact information is here. And finally, to learn more about the program, you can visit our website and the funding opportunity page, which has all the associated documents and where you can apply is the second link down here. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Wendy, for Q&A.
Hello, everyone. We've had some great questions come in. Alexia, I'm gonna, we had 3 university-related questions, so I'm gonna ask them because it seems natural that they all flow together. Is a university an eligible entity? And can a nonprofit be a higher education institution? And another question, which is, are universities allowed to submit a proposal if we have DOT local government involved?
Yeah, to answer the question, universities are eligible to apply either as like nonprofit category or even the employer category. And the second question about already a DOT partner, I don't see why that would be an issue.
Great, thank you. We have another question that I would like to answer. If we have not submitted a planning track in round 1, are we still allowed to submit a demonstration or implementation proposal for phase 2? And my answer would be yes. This round 2 opportunity is open to all eligible organizations, even those who are not part of the planning track. So with that, I have another question, and this one is going to be directed to Richard. By what date must the completed mobility plan be submitted? And by what date to qualify for the next demonstration round?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's not really a hard date, but ideally, we'd expect most of these plans to be have been completed by the time the proposals are submitted. As if you look through the proposal narrative documents and then, sort of what was covered in the planning tasks, there's sort of like a sequential flow. So one will definitely inform the other. So ideally, right, earlier, as soon as possible, and in advance of the due date of September.
Excellent. I'm going to answer the next question as well. Will these slides be available after the webinar for reference? And yes, the slides will be available, and also this webinar is being recorded and closed captioned. So with that, we have another question, and I'm going to have Alexia answer it. Are 3-wheel vehicles like rickshaws, pedicabs grouped with 2-wheel vehicles or with 4-wheel vehicles?
I'm assuming this is in reference to the showcase that's happening on August 14th. To my knowledge, at this point, there aren't any 3-wheeled options in the list, but should any of those providers be added, I think we will definitely let folks know. If you look at the directory, you can see who's already included on that list. And the directory was sort of compiled through previous state programs that compile similar list and additional research. So, it is possible that some of these mobility options were not included. But yeah, if they are added, likely in the 2-wheel session, just given that we have fewer providers in that category. I think, as you saw, the 4-wheeled session was a lot longer.
Thank you, Alexia. So the next question we received, and I'm going to direct this towards Richard. So this program does not support new technology development. Instead, it supports the existing technology that is well developed. Is that right? Additionally, does the program support technology that is under development?
Yeah, so this is, as we mentioned, commercially viable and mature technologies. Ideally, at this stage, this is not a research and development or a product development program. These funds are really geared towards demonstration-ready technology that's really ready to be implemented at these communities that have a mobility or transportation access issue. So, there might be some wiggle room in terms of like what's viable, but again, if you look at the if you look at the proposal requirements and the narrative, it'll give you a good idea on like you're going to need a budget for that, long-term funding sustainability, has it been done before, things like that.
Okay, so the questions have slowed down, but if anybody has additional questions, we encourage them to share it through the Q&A feature.
Yes. And as a reminder, for those who don't see the Q&A feature on your screen, you can hit the 3 dots that are in the bottom right-hand slide, and it should come up as the Slido Q&A feature.
We have another question. So I'm going to direct this to Alexia. When you say community-based organization, is that required to be a 501c3 nonprofit?